On the night I came home and found my back door unlocked, I knew I'd been right for months. My name is Derek, I'm 31. I work as a network technician for a mid-sized company outside Roanoke, Virginia. I bought a small house off Route 220 about 2 years before any of this started. Single-story detached garage, a strip of yard out back with a wood fence, nothing special. The kind of place you feel safe without thinking about it. My routine was predictable, I'll own that. I left for work at 7:15 every morning. I stopped at the same Sheets on the way and same pump, same coffee, same 5 minutes standing in the parking lot checking my phone. Home between 5:30 and 6. Dinner, something on TV, bed. I had a German Shepherd mix named Hatch. Weekends he got me up early. We'd walk the same loop through the neighborhood down to the end of Caldwell Street and back. Same loop, same time, most mornings. I didn't think anything of it. That's the thing about routine. You stop noticing it because it stops feeling like information. I'm telling you this because I need you to understand. I was not a paranoid person. I was not looking for problems. The first thing I noticed was small enough that I almost let it go. It was a Tuesday in late October. I came home and there was a package on my porch. Amazon box, my name on it. Normal. What wasn't normal was that the tape had been cut. Not torn, cut. Clean line across the top seam, then pressed back down. The box had been opened and resealed. I stood there for a minute just looking at it. Then I looked up and down the street. Nothing. A couple of cars in driveways, wind moving some leaves. I remember the air smelled like chimney smoke from somewhere down the block. It was the kind of smell that should have made me feel at home. Instead, it made the moment feel wrong in a way I couldn't name. I brought the box inside. Everything was still there. Ethernet cables I'd ordered, nothing missing, nothing added. I told myself a delivery driver had opened the wrong box. I almost believed it. 3 weeks later, my neighbor Carol, she's in her 60s, retired, home most of the day, knocked on my door on a Saturday morning. She asked if I'd had a contractor over the week before. I said no. Why? She said she'd seen a man in my backyard on Wednesday afternoon. Medium height, heavy build, dark jacket, just standing near the back fence looking at the house. She'd assumed he was working on something. He was there for about 20 minutes before he walked around the side and out of view. She said he wasn't doing anything, just standing still, just looking. That detail settled into me like something cold. I thanked her. I went inside. I checked the gate latch on the fence. It wasn't damaged, but the latch pin wasn't seated right. It had been opened and closed again, not latched all the way back. Someone had been in my yard. I bought a basic camera, 1 unit, pointed at the back door. I told myself that was enough. It wasn't. The patterns started coming into focus in November. My mail had been disturbed, not taken, just shuffled. Bills I knew I'd tucked behind the catalogs were on top. A neighbor 2 houses down, a guy named Marcus, mentioned in passing that some man had stopped him on the sidewalk one morning and asked which house was mine. Marcus described the same build Carol had. Marcus had told him he didn't know and walked away. He mentioned it the way you mention mild weather. I didn't sleep well that week. I'd lie there and listen to the house. Old houses have their own sounds, the tick of pipes, the frame settling in the cold, hat shifting on the floor near the foot of the bed. I knew all of those sounds. I started cataloging the ones I didn't recognize. A soft creak from the back of the house, wind finding a gap somewhere. I told myself that's what it was. Then in December, a woman I worked with named Patris pulled me aside after a meeting. Someone had called the main office line asking for my direct extension, my schedule, and whether I drove to work or took the interstate. The receptionist hadn't given anything out, but they'd asked. That was when I stopped making excuses. I thought about who this could be. I'd had a bad ending with a guy from a previous job, workplace dispute, a few ugly emails, HR got involved. That was almost a year before and I hadn't heard from him since, but someone knew my address, they knew my workplace, they knew enough to stake out my yard on a Wednesday afternoon when I was at the office. I changed my locks in January, both deadbolts front and back. I added a reinforced door frame plate on the back door, the kind with a heavy steel strike box seated deep into the frame, not just screwed into soft trim. 2 more cameras, one at the front corner of the house, one covering the driveway. Every morning when I pulled my old Tacoma out of the garage, I'd pause at the end of the driveway and look both ways down the street before pulling out, not casually, deliberately. For about 3 weeks it felt quiet. I started to wonder if I'd scared them off. Then I found the card. It was on my front porch on a Thursday evening in late January. It had rained most of the day and then the temperature dropped sharply, so there was a skim of ice on the porch steps when I got home. The porch light was on. I could see the envelope from the driveway, a plain white envelope with my first name on it, just Derek, no address, no stamp, hand-delivered. Inside was a note card. On it was a photograph printed on regular paper. It was a picture of me and Hatch walking in the neighborhood, from behind, close enough that you could read the logo on my jacket. There was no note, just the photo. I want to try to describe what that moment felt like. People imagine it's frightening in a sharp, immediate way. It wasn't, it was slower than that. I stood in my doorway looking at the photo, and what I felt first was a kind of stillness. Like my body was processing something my brain hadn't caught up to yet. The cold air coming in through the open door, the sound of a car passing 2 streets over, Hatch pressing his nose against the back of my knee the way he did when something was off. Then the understanding arrived, fully formed. Someone had been close enough to photograph my face. They had decided not to use that shot. They chose the one from behind instead. That choice meant something. I didn't know what exactly, but it meant something. I went cold in a way I hadn't felt since I was a kid. I stood there for a few seconds not moving. Then I went inside and locked both deadbolts. I called the police that night, not for the first time. I'd filed a report in November when Marcus told me about the man on the sidewalk. But this time I brought everything: the report from November, Carol's contact information, Petrus's account of the phone call at the office, the note card with the photo still in the envelope, and the camera footage from December which showed a figure standing at the corner of my fence line for 11 minutes, 2 in the morning, a night I had been asleep inside. 11 minutes. I had watched that footage 4 or 5 times by then. It didn't get easier, just a shape, standing still in the dark, watching a house where someone was sleeping. The detective who took the case was named Akafer, quiet, methodical. He looked through everything and didn't dismiss any of it. He said the photo on the note card alone changed the classification of what we were dealing with. A friend of mine, Travis, came and stayed for 10 days. I'm not too proud to say I needed that. Having someone else in the house at night made a difference. We didn't talk about it much. He slept on the couch, kept odd hours. Just having another set of footsteps in the house took the edge off. Hatch liked him. That helped too. Detective Akafer ran the image through a process I don't fully understand. The photo paper matched a brand sold at a specific Office Depot, the one on Williamson Road. They pulled the security footage. From that, and from a little more work I wasn't fully briefed on, they identified the man. It was the guy from my old job, the one HR had dealt with. He'd moved to the area the previous spring without my knowing it. He'd been watching me for at least 8 months before the note card. They arrested him in February. He had a folder on his laptop. Photos of my house, my car, my street, a log of my schedule when I left, when I came back, which nights I stayed up late. The log went back to August. It was detailed. Timestamps, notes, patterns he'd written down in plain language like he was tracking weather data. Detective Akafer showed me one page. I read about 3 lines before I handed it back. He pleaded out felony stalking charge, supervised probation, and a permanent restraining order. I know that sounds light. It felt light to me too. I stayed in the house. I kept the cameras. I kept the second deadbolt. I kept the reinforced strike plate. I put the porch light on a timer so it doesn't signal anything about when I'm actually home. It's been over a year now. Most nights are fine. Most nights I don't think about it. But every now and then I come home after dark and I sit in the Tacoma for a minute before I get out. I just look at the yard. I look at the sidewalk. I check that nothing is on the porch that shouldn't be there. I don't tell myself I'm imagining it anymore. I stopped doing that a long time ago. I was on Sycamore Loop when I realized the silver Camry in the driveway had been different every single night for a week. My name is Dan. I'm 37. I work HVAC out of a shop off Route 355 in Montgomery County, Maryland. Long days, early mornings. The last thing I needed was a twice-a-week volunteer shift walking the subdivision after dark. But my HOA coordinator, a retired postal worker named Gary, knocked on my door in September and made it sound almost mandatory. There'd been a string of package thefts on Birchwood Court, 3 mailboxes pried open in 1 month. Gary said they needed bodies. I had legs and a Tuesday night, so I said fine. The program was low-tech. Gary ran it out of a binder. He handed me a laminated route card, a photocopied map of the 30-block subdivision with a highlighted path through it. I got a yellow safety vest, a battery flashlight, and a cheap handheld radio that crackled if you held it wrong. My partner was supposed to be a guy named Phil who lived 4 streets over. Phil canceled on me the second week and never rescheduled. After that, I walked alone. The shifts were quiet. I logged unusual vehicles in a small spiral notebook, make, color, plate if I could read it. I noted lights left on in houses the roster said were vacant. I noted anything propped open. Nothing ever happened. I'd walk the route in about 45 minutes, drop the notebook on Gary's porch in a labeled bag, and go home. 3 months of that, nothing. Then the Camry. The house was 14 Sycamore Loop, 2-car garage, white siding, the kind of place that looks like 15 other houses on the same street. According to Gary's resident list, it belonged to a couple named Cho, Raymond, and Susan. 2 vehicles registered, a white Accord and a gray Pilot. Both usually sat in the driveway. But the week of the 14th, neither one was there. A silver Camry sat in their place. The following night, a dark green Altima. Night after that, a white pickup, an older Ranger, no plates visible. Then the Camry again. I logged all of it. I didn't think much of it at first. Family visiting, maybe. People own more cars than you'd expect. What slowed me down was the lights. The Cho house should have had interior lights on a timer. I'd seen them before, warm amber through the front window curtains around 9 o'clock. That week, nothing. The house was dark every night I passed. On the third dark night, I stopped on the sidewalk and stood there long enough to start noticing other things. No porch light, no blue TV flicker at the edges of the blinds, just black windows and the low hum of a street lamp 40 feet away. It had dropped into the low 40s that week, one of those Maryland Novembers where the cold arrives fast and stays sharp. I stood there longer than I should have, long enough that my fingers went stiff around the flashlight. I mentioned it to Gary when I saw him picking up his mail. He nodded and wrote something on a sticky note and said he'd look into it. That was it. That was the whole conversation. The following Tuesday, I went to pull my route card from Gary's porch. There was a new addition marked in red pen. A small dead-end stub called Millrace Place, 4 houses, tucked behind the retention pond off the eastern edge of the subdivision near the Maryland Route 28 connector. It hadn't been on any route I'd walked before. I asked Gary about it the next time I saw him at the Circle K on Shady Grove Road. He said the block had requested coverage after a car got keyed. That made sense. Something still sat wrong about it. I got home that night and dug through the HOA community site. Millrace Place had 6 registered households. I recognized 4 names. The other 2, listed as T. Briggs and C. Morin, weren't in the subdivision directory at all. The roster was a PDF dated 14 months ago. I told myself it was outdated records and let it go. What I couldn't let go was the notebook. I kept my logs on my kitchen counter between shifts. Nothing special about it, a green-covered mead spiral from CVS. But the Tuesday after I'd logged the 3rd car at the Cho house, I came downstairs and the notebook wasn't there. I checked my jacket pocket. I checked the car. My wife was in Pittsburgh visiting her sister that whole week, so she hadn't touched it. The notebook was just gone. I bought a new one and started keeping it locked in my truck. A few nights later, Gary called me on the radio during a shift. He didn't radio in often. Usually it was just static and the occasional check-in. But that night he broke in and asked which street I was on, and then he asked if I'd been down Millrace yet. I told him I was heading there next. He said, "Let me know what you see on the way in." Not let me know if anything looks off, not keep an eye out on the way in. I didn't answer. I clicked the radio twice and kept walking. The air had gone very still, that particular kind of still you get after 9 o'clock in a residential neighborhood when the last dog has stopped barking and the last garage door has closed. The kind where your own footsteps sound deliberate. I passed the retention pond. It smelled like cold mud and dead grass. The path to Millrace was a concrete strip about 8 feet wide, flanked by a chain-link fence on the left side bordering the utility easement. The chain on the fence gate, a heavy padlocked length I'd noticed weeks earlier, was looped through the post but not latched. It hung loose. I noted it and kept moving. The corner house on Millrace had a side gate that opened onto an alley path. I'd passed it a dozen times. That night, the gate was propped open with a brick. And standing just inside the gate, half in the shadow of the fence line, was a man in a yellow safety vest. I stopped. He was standing still, facing the side window of the house. Not walking, not checking anything, just standing there watching the window. He hadn't noticed me, or if he had, he didn't show it. I took 3 slow steps back. I got behind the hedgerow on the opposite curb and watched him. He was maybe 6 feet, broad through the shoulders, dark pants, yellow vest. He raised his phone and took a photo of the window. Then he held the phone down at his side. Then he typed something slow and deliberate like he had a format he always followed. When the screen lit up the underside of his jaw, I could see he was completely calm. No fidgeting, no checking over his shoulder. He had done this before. There was a light on inside that house. I could see a television playing through the bottom gap of the blinds. The colors shifted, blue to orange to blue, the way they do during a commercial break. Someone was home, sitting in there in the warm and the dark, watching television, with no idea there was a man in a safety vest photographing their window from an alley 30 feet away. I went cold, not scared exactly, just cold. The kind where your hands go still and your brain starts running very quietly. He was casing the house. He was using the vest, a vest exactly like mine, exactly like Gary's spares that sat in a box on Gary's porch, to stand in a residential alley and photograph a lit window while someone was inside it. The vest was the whole trick. It was a costume that meant nothing, and it worked because nobody questions a man in a safety vest. I hadn't questioned it for 3 months. I was part of the reason it worked. I did not confront him. I want to be honest about that. I'm a 37-year-old HVAC tech with a bad left knee. He was bigger than me, and I was alone on a side street at 10:15 at night. I turned around and walked at a normal pace back to my truck on Birchwood Court. I sat in the truck. I thought about calling Gary. Then I thought about how Gary had asked me what I'd see on the way in. I thought about my missing notebook. I thought about T. Briggs and C. Moran not existing in any directory. I thought about the chain on the utility gate hanging loose. I thought about how easy it would be to use a route card, a photocopied map of every street in the subdivision, with a highlighted path showing exactly where a volunteer would be and exactly when, if you wanted to know which houses were being watched and which weren't. I didn't call Gary. I called the non-emergency line for Montgomery County Police. I told them what I'd seen. I gave them the address, the description of the man, and the vest. The dispatcher took it seriously. She asked if I could stay near Millrace. I said I'd wait at the entrance on the main road. 2 officers arrived in about 12 minutes. They went down Millrace on foot. When one of them came back to me, he said the man was gone, but they'd photographed the brick propping the gate. A neighbor across the alley had a ring camera that probably caught him. I gave them my number and went home. I did not drop a log on Gary's porch that night. 6 weeks later, a detective called me. They'd made an arrest, a man connected to 7 residential burglaries across 3 subdivisions in upper Montgomery County. He'd been working with a partner. The pattern was always the same: photograph occupied homes to confirm schedules, then return when the house was dark. At least 2 of the targeted houses were on watch routes. The detective asked how I'd gotten connected to the program. I told her Gary had recruited me. She thanked me and hung up. I never found out exactly how deep Gary was in it, whether he was careless, whether he was compromised, whether it was something worse. Gary stepped down as watch coordinator 2 weeks after that call. No announcement. His name just disappeared from the HOA site. Someone sent a group email saying the program was under review. I quit the same week. I still walk at night sometimes. My neighborhood, same streets, same dark. I just don't wear the vest. And I don't take notes anymore. The trailhead log had a name in it I recognized, and that name belonged to a dead man. I'm a ranger at a backcountry unit in the northern Cascades, Washington State. We cover about 340,000 acres of wilderness, and on a full staffing day there are 4 of us. Most days it's 3. The park is mostly vertical: granite walls, snowfields, valleys that don't show up on visitor center maps because nobody maintains trails down there anymore. There are ridgelines my supervisor has never walked. There are creek drainages that haven't been officially documented since the 1980s. I'd been with the unit 6 years when this happened. My name is Derek. I knew this park. I was not a new hire jumping at shadows. It started as a routine welfare check. Dispatch radioed around 7 in the morning. A couple had been reported overdue by a family member back in Bellingham. They'd signed in at the Coldwater Creek trailhead 2 days prior, planned a one-night loop, and hadn't called home. Standard stuff: people run late, people lose track of time. My partner that morning was a seasonal named Holt. Good kid, 3 seasons in, reliable. We took the patrol truck, a Dodge Ram 2500 we called the Mule because it had been hit by a falling tree twice and survived both times, and drove 12 miles of gravel to the Coldwater Creek trailhead. The couple's Subaru was there, a gray Outback with a cracked rear bumper sticker, only car in the lot. I went to the trailhead register first, always check the log before heading in. Metal box on a post, spiral notebook inside. People sign their name, party size, destination, expected return. The couple had signed in, Marcus and Lena Vale, 2 people, Monday 6:40 in the morning, destination Upper Coldwater Basin, return Tuesday evening. That matched dispatch. That was fine. The entry below there stopped me cold. Single hiker, signed in Tuesday, yesterday. The name written there was Gary Paulsrud. I knew that name. Gary Paulsrud had gone missing in this park 2 years ago, November. Solo hiker. We searched for 11 days. We never found him. The county declared him dead 6 months later. His family held a service. I looked at the handwriting, neat, unhurried, first name, last name, no destination, no expected return. I showed Holt. He read it twice. That's got to be somebody else, he said. Maybe it's not a common name, but it's not impossible. I photographed the page and we headed in. The trail to Upper Coldwater Basin is about 7 miles. The first 4 are maintained, marked, worn smooth by summer boots. The last 3 climb hard into the backcountry. No blazes past mile 5. You navigate by landmarks and the fact that the basin is the only flat ground up there. We found the Vale's first campsite at mile 3. A small stone ring, cold ash, a granola bar wrapper tucked under a rock. Nothing wrong. We pushed on, late September, cold and clear. The kind of day where the light goes hard and flat by 3 in the afternoon. At mile 5, we found a second camp. It was not the Vale's. It was set back from the trail about 30 yards, tucked against a rock outcropping. A single backpacking tent, green, old, no-name brand. The rain fly was attached wrong, clipped to the wrong poles, so it hung loose on one side and pulled tight on the other. Either someone didn't know what they were doing or they'd put it up in a hurry. I called out, no response. The fire ring was fresh. The ash was still warm when I held my hand over it. Someone had had a fire that morning. Holt unzipped the outer fly and looked inside. "Derek," he said, quiet. I went over. No sleeping bag, no sleeping pad, just a pile of clothing, jeans, a fleece jacket, heavy wool socks, hiking boots. The boots were unlaced but sitting upright, side by side. The clothes were folded and stacked like laundry. The boots bothered me most. You don't leave your boots in a tent and walk off into the Cascades in bare feet. Not in late September, not on this terrain. We marked the location on my GPS unit and called it in. I asked dispatch to pull the Gary Paulsrud missing person file and check for any next of kin with a reason to be up here. They said they'd check. We kept going, found the Vales at mile 6.5. They were fine, physically fine. Marcus had twisted his ankle on a boulder field and they'd decided to shelter until it improved. They were sitting on their ground pads eating crackers and peanut butter when we came over the rise, relieved to see us, normal people in a normal situation. We got them strapped up and moving. On the way back down, I was watching the tree line. Not for anything specific, just watching. 6 years in this park, you develop a sense for when something is looking back at you. It's not mystical, it's pattern recognition. Something moves wrong, something stays too still. At mile 5, coming past the tent again, I saw him. He was standing in the trees about 40 yards off the trail, not moving, watching us, a man in a gray shirt and dark pants, no jacket, no pack, no shoes, standing on bare feet on the forest floor on a 38-degree morning, watching 4 people walk past him. I stopped, I looked right at him. He didn't move. "Hey," I called out, "sir, you okay?" He turned and walked into the trees, unhurried, like he had somewhere to be. He didn't run, he didn't look back, he was just gone. Holt had been helping Marcus manage the trail. He hadn't seen it. I wanted to go after him. I thought about it for 3 or 4 seconds. One able-bodied ranger, dense timber, fading afternoon light, an injured civilian in my party. I didn't go. I radioed dispatch again. Male subject, gray shirt, no visible footwear, heading north into untrailed terrain near the secondary camp at mile 5. I requested law enforcement and a second ranger unit. We got the Vales to the trailhead by 4:15. A county sheriff's deputy pulled in right behind us. A 3-person team went back up that afternoon with full packs and overnight gear. They reached the camp at mile 5 before dark. The tent was still there. The clothes inside were still there. They did not find the man. They pushed to the basin and camped overnight. The next morning they swept north into the untrailed drainage, a steep drop into an area we informally call the Back Bowl. One confirmed fatality down there in my time at the park. Bad terrain, nobody visits. 2 miles into the Back Bowl they found a small debris field, a coffee can badly rusted, a rope tied to a tree frayed through, an old tarp weighted down with rocks, signs of a camp that had been used over a long period of time. Maybe years, no recent fire, no person. They came out the following afternoon. I wrote up my incident report. I included everything. The register entry, the tent, the clothing, the visual at mile 5. My supervisor called me into his office 2 days later. 30 years in the federal system. Good man. He sat across from me and slid my report back across the desk. "The register entry," he said. "How confident are you on that?" I told him I was certain. I'd photographed it. He looked at the photograph for a moment. Then he said, "The county closed the Paulsrud case. Far as they're concerned, it's resolved." I told him I understood that. "I need you to characterize the register entry as illegible in the final report," he said. He didn't look happy about it. He wasn't asking because he wanted to. He was asking because he'd already gotten a call, and the call had come from somewhere above him, and that was the end of the conversation. I changed the report, illegible entry, unknown party. The tent and the clothing were logged as abandoned gear and removed. No forensic workup was requested. I asked about it. Nobody answered. The Gary Paulsrud missing person file stays closed. I've talked to 2 other rangers who knew the Coldwater Creek area before my time. One of them, a retired ranger named Cress who'd moved to Bellingham, called me back after I reached out. She said the back bowl had a history, not recent history, old history, people going in and not coming out, going back further than the park's own records. She said the Paulsrud search had made some of the old-timers uncomfortable because of where his last known position was. I asked her what was down there. She was quiet for a moment. Nothing you can find on a map, she said. That's always been the problem. I still work that unit. I still patrol Coldwater Creek. I've been back to Mile 5 a dozen times in the 2 years since. I've never seen that man again. But there have been 2 more entries in that logbook, same neat handwriting. First name, last name, no destination, no return time, different names each time. Names I didn't recognize. Names I probably shouldn't look up. There are drainages in the back bowl we haven't officially surveyed in over 20 years. I think that might be by design.